What I said simply was giving people the it's already happened in bigger cities. Like the liberalization has already happened in bigger cities. Just do it across the board. It's that simple. That's it. And not only after like massive discontent and massive protests, but do it as a mechanism of survival. That's it. You will pet me whether you like it or not. Iran, ladies and gentlemen, the story that everyone has been waiting for. Okay. Obviously, this is something that took place in Los Angeles, where a U-Haul driver, possibly an MEK supporter, drove his van, his U-Haul van, into a crowd of Shah supporters. So the diaspora is fighting amongst itself. You know, blood is in the water. But this, of course, comes after days of a fuck ton of protests exploding all over Iran, and the government shutting off access to the internet, as they usually do in times like this, only to stamp out these protests in the most violent and repressive ways possible. The protests have been going on for 11 days at this point, and they have been incredibly bloody. Both the government security forces killing a bunch of protesters, including like random innocent civilians, as far as we understand, but also the security forces killing a bunch of protesters, and the protests themselves that have actually killed a bunch of members of the police. What? Typo? Sorry. What's the typo? Why did you link me my own tweet? This dude is wearing a Quality Leering Center hoodie that he made and can't even tie his own shoelace. Can't even tie his own shoelaces. Oh,
Positive billionaires who you think are creating.
All right, well, I edited it. Where was I? I was talking about Iran. So, as I was saying, there were security forces that killed a bunch of Iranian protesters, and there were a bunch of protesters that killed Iranian security forces, the police. There was reports of even a firefighter being lit on fire, mosques. And even though the past iterations, and including this one, of protests and mass discontent that has led to violent protests in general, like violent response from the administration, from the regime in general, has often been talked about on geopolitical terms, whether it's like Mossad-backed, CIA-backed, and there's truth to all of that. Ultimately, I mean, there is a valid reason for why a lot of the youth in Iran especially are protesting. As I've said over and over again, in as far as how these things go, the American government is obviously very impactful as far as destroying the Iranian economy, and the Iranian economy has been thoroughly destroyed. The inception point for these protests came from the rial losing almost all of its worth, and shopkeepers not being able to stock their own stores. That initially started off as a smaller protest on the economy has exploded into this massive thing. Okay. And there are obviously numerous reasons for it, as I've talked about over and over again. One of the major factors, of course, is the sanctions that are specifically designed to destroy the Iranian economy so that Iranians mobilize against the administration. So in that regard, there is a lot of Western involvement. Having said that, however, to say that the administration's own responsibility here in terms of not leaning into any reforms or whatsoever is not playing a major role in the discontent would be silly. Okay? Let's be real. This is something I've talked about before as well, over and over again. One of the biggest issues with the Islamic Republic is the repressive nature of the regime. Iran, contrary to what people think about it, contrary to what people know about it, is actually an incredibly educated and somewhat very woke society. And by that, I mean the Iranian population is very woke and very educated. Okay? I mean, they have, I think I saw one of these guys who's not like exactly aligned with me. I forget what his name is, but I saw a post about like how people misunderstand how the Iranian society operates, how Iranian people operate, that basically said, you know, the Islamic Republic wants women to wear the hijab, but they want the hijabis to build the rockets. And I think that's a pretty solid way to summarize the situation, where they want female engineers. They just want the female engineers to be hijabi. And of course, there are a lot of people who don't want that. A lot of people in Iran that don't find that to be that find that level of repression to be unacceptable. And as far as, oh yeah, this is it. People don't here. This was the take. People don't understand the mindset of the Islamic Republican in the slightest. They are not looking for personal enrichment. Assad. They are not a sponsored state like North Korea. They're not a foreign clan ruling over an occupied country. They are a homegrown ideological movement with a large base of support. Exactly, approximately 1/4 of the country is firmly committed to this support. Okay, they're firmly committed to this ideological movement. This is why it's a little different. Okay, they are motivated by nationalism, anti-Westernism. These first two draw their leftist and secular supporters inside of Iran. This person is not talking about outside of Iran. He's talking about people inside of Iran that still find themselves in support of the current administration in Iran, and a desire to cultivate a society that is both modern and Islamic. This last part is where most people get lost. They can imagine that Iranians want true sovereignty or that they hate the West like other global Southerners. It's hard for Westerners to understand that Iranians are not the Taliban. They don't want to deprive women of education. They want a hijabi to design the missiles. Okay? This is why Qasem Soleimani was to Ardeshir Zahedi a soldier of Iran, nationalism, to third worldists and anti-imperialists, and to people in Iran fighting for values. This is the reality. Iran is an incredibly, incredibly complex and incredibly diverse country, okay? Many different sects, different religions, and many different ethnic groups exist under one nation's boundaries. A nation that is built around thousands and thousands of years of shared history, okay? Parish, what? So no matter who, quote unquote, runs Iran, there is always going to be a tremendous amount of difficulties, especially considering that there is the Balochistan independence movement. You got the Kurds, you got the Turks, you got the Azeri Turks, you got the Persians, right? You have Iranian Jews, which are much tinier, obviously, in numbers, I believe around like 11,000. But ultimately, this is the reason why it's a very difficult country to, and Arabs, Uzbeks. Ultimately, the reason why it has had a very bro. That tweet is obviously pro IR. No, this person is not pro Islamic Republic, brother. Actually, that's the reason why I said he's not. He probably doesn't align with me on some of the things. Like, I mean, I'm not pro Islamic Republic either, but I am pro Iranian sovereignty. I'm sure you can get Sharkzadeh to clarify his take. He's a great content creator, but you're obviously misinterpreting it, if I'm understanding you correctly. He's saying hijab is not repressive or incompatible with modernity. You're completely butchering his take. No, I personally think not that hijab is incompatible with modernity, but I personally think that for those who are devoid of choice does become repressive. Okay? His take there is simply stating that people see the hijab and they think, oh, this is just like the Taliban. Women can't read. Women are not allowed to read. That's not the case. That's the juxtaposition. That's what he's actually highlighting here. Okay? I'm saying that some of the reasons as to why the Islamic Republic is seen in a very negative light, despite the fact that initially in the revolution it was seen as the most viable outcome and the most viable popular support receiving faction that would deliver Iranian sovereignty, years since the Iranian Revolution has been met with tremendous scrutiny over time. Part of the reason why they have received this scrutiny is because of the repressive elements of the state. There's also obviously some speculation surrounding corruption, but ultimately the major force here is the economy. And the reason why the economy is the way it is because of the United States of America. Having said that, the way I've always interpreted it is, as a Muslim, this is just ridiculous. The talking point should not be about the hijab. It's not. For the youth that experience economic shocks and feel like and recognize a sense of crisis, that then on top of that experience repression from a very powerful regional actor that is consistently at battle with America's vassal state, Israel, in the region, that is desperately trying to maintain sovereignty. They both derive their power. They both derive their legitimacy from being anti-Western, and they also need to maintain their legitimacy within their base. And in order to do so, they refuse to let up from they refuse to liberalize certain aspects of their governance, especially when it comes to the Ayatollah, okay? Especially when it comes to the Islamic form of governance. Although Iran is much more woke technically than Saudi Arabia or many of the Gulf counterparts, there is still a level of repression that, paired up with economic instability, causes these kinds of this kind of resentment brewing in the country. Now, do I think personally that that if the like led by the reformist presidents that have come and gone in the past, if they were able to successfully liberalize certain aspects of Iranian existence, would that have actually been successful in terms of keeping the population at bay, not frustrating them, and also refuse or also push back against any sort of intervention from the West? I don't know. But from what I can see, this is a part of the problem. Beyond the economic instability, there is a real element within Iranian society, specifically the Iranian youth, that don't like the Islamic Republic for a multitude of different reasons. And especially for the youth, a big part of the reason is the repression. I feel like you overblow that aspect. There are far more people pro whatever social norms the IRGC imposes than those against it. It's a Muslim country. The major cities are already relaxed. It's usually diaspora members or paid agitators or politically naive youth who are the biggest proponents. I agree the economy is a major factor. I don't think that's the only, I don't think you're right about that. Like, I think that, I don't think you're right about that at all. I think that there are people who are even normally supposed to be a part of the base that have said enough is enough about the sanctions and its impact. But then there are also plenty of people who are not a part of the base of support for the Islamic Republic that are very frustrated about the repressive elements. Okay? And then also add on to the pile the obvious paid agitation, Western intervention, both from the diaspora communities, but certainly from the CIA and also Israel, and you create a powder keg. I think that certainly plays a role, though. From my understanding, the way these protests are different is because the base of the Islamic Republic is on the side of the protest, ethnically Persian business owners. It feels like you're attributing your education and Islamic initiative to yielding more pro-liberal takes. It makes no sense to me. Women technically have more freedom than American women to be educated debt-free. Even if they liberalized, you'd have the same problems of instability down the line. No, I don't think so. I think part of the reason, at least from my assessment, and I do have my own personal biases growing up in Turkey, obviously, which is a secular country, right? And a secular country that actually saw a fairly conservative movement take hold and develop a regime of its own, the Erdogan government, using protection of Islamic liberties, Islamic practices as a rallying cry. And that change that took place in the country culturally, and that change that took place in terms of like repression, nowhere near to the same degree as like, you know, what people experience in Iran, has led me to at least have some level of bias in terms of living under a rule where there's like, you know, you're like what you could possibly experience as freedoms you do not get. I think you're not recognizing how much that plays a role for especially a lot of young people, and simply discarding that as, or casting that aside as the silliness of youth is not correct. Okay. But to what end? Do you want them to become like France? No, that's not what I said at all. What I said simply was giving people the it's already happened in bigger cities. Like the liberalization has already happened in bigger cities. Just do it across the board. It's that simple. That's it. And not only after like massive discontent and massive protests, but do it as a mechanism of survival. That's it. But I do think that because the Islamic Republic derives its legitimacy from being anti-West, and in that side of the world, the most effective way to showcase your anti-Western bona fides is by being Islamist. Like, that is the most uncorruptible force. That's the way it's seen. Okay, any sort of giving up on that mentality will be met with resistance from your base, and that's basically what I'm trying to explain. Which is they're stuck between a rock and a hard place in many instances, where if they were to let up on that, they could potentially lose some of their own base, and then they couldn't justify their existence any longer. You will pet me, whether you like it or not. whether you like it or not.